help make our lives more green. Guillermo is with the Cornell Cooperative Extension Center, and tell us about the center and yourself, Guillermo. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I've been with Cooperative Extension about 12 years and working on mainly energy and green building issues. So renewable energy, energy efficiency work, green building in terms of natural materials, green building materials, and green building design. And most of what we do is really just education and outreach like this to really inform the public about their energy options for reducing their energy use overall and transitioning off of fossil fuels. So cutting back on our use of fossil fuels. And there's a lot of options for doing so at this point. So it was thrown out there that if anybody has questions, please do go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. I can't see everybody, but Cheryl's offered to kind of keep an eye on everyone and hopefully be able to kind of let me know if there's any questions. And I'm happy to stop the presentation anytime to answer questions as we go. And then we'll at least save some time at the end for questions also. So thanks. And so the two things that I was asked to talk about are solar, and there are a lot of options for going solar now. And the other was lighting. So these are kind of two different things, but I'll cover both of them and we'll talk about lighting toward the end. So the things I want to let you get away with or leave you with from the whole presentation is that solar is for everyone. There are options for everyone out there at this point. It is a good source of energy, just basically. And so I'll give you some sense of what solar is. But before we get into that even, I always want to preface things by talking about energy efficiency. So before you think about any kind of alternative energy or renewables or transitioning off fossil fuels or anything like that, let's try to reduce our energy consumption as much as possible. And so that is basically energy conservation. And that starts with an energy assessment or an energy audit. And this basically is a physical for your home. Somebody will come in and identify areas of waste where you're using too much energy, areas that could be upgraded so there's not enough, for example, something like insulation or air sealing. And then they'll also look at your appliances and see if they're old or not performing well. So these are all areas that you can kind of address energy-wise on your home. And then you'll get a report back in a couple weeks with the details of what they found out and the associated costs and payback of any of the recommended upgrades that they recommend for you. And then there's also other benefits besides just the cost and the savings. So there's improved comfort from doing any kind of energy upgrades, and there's some level of social responsibility, especially in these times of climate change. So now solar. Again, solar is for everyone. So we'll talk about rooftop and ground-mounted systems, and you can have with or without battery backup, and these are on-site systems. And then community solar options. And finally, something called ESCOs, or energy service companies. And there are some with 100% renewable option. So to kick off with, there's grid tied with battery backup or off-grid system. Essentially, grid tied, it means that the home generates its own electricity, but you can draw power from the utility company at night. So it's connected to the utility grid. Off-grid essentially usually is completely separate from the grid. So you have your solar or your wind or some sort of energy producer on site, and then you can often store the energy in batteries for use at night or when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. But essentially, you're not connected to the grid. You can't feed the grid and you can't feed off of the grid. And these are much less common. So on-site grid-tied systems look like this. You have the utility service with the wires that you're used to seeing outside your home down the road, and those feed into your home and into your meter. And then inside the house, you'll have an inverter, and the meter will be changed out for what's called a bidirectional meter. So you can feed the grid with your solar panels, and then the solar the grid can feed your home as well. And it just seamlessly takes electricity from wherever it needs it. If your home, if you're vacuuming and you're doing dishes and laundry and a bunch of electrical uses in your house, and your panels aren't producing enough electricity for all those needs, then it'll just take what it needs from the grid. And if you're away from the house, say you were working out of the house in better times than these, or you were just out visiting someone or shopping, and your panels are collecting energy from the sun, then you would feed that back into the grid, and you get credits for those. So we'll talk about those in a little minute. So again, you own the panels. You do need good orientation that's clear of obstructions. There's a high upfront cost, but it's a good investment over time because you lock in your electricity rate, essentially. And the power is net metered, so the credits build up and they're used up over the course of a year. Now, I do want to address the question we get a lot is, does solar work here in cloudy upstate New York? And the answer, I would say, is definitely yes. So here's a solar irradiance map of the country, including Alaska and Hawaii. And you can see New York up there in the top right is sort of a darkish green with some light green in there as well. And so that's about this, the left, it's toward the middle of ideal, of what you really want in terms of good quality sunshine. And if we look at other countries like Spain or Germany, Germany you see is quite purple, way over on the left, and that's terrible. That they have very little sun in Germany over the course of a year, mainly because of their higher latitudes than we are. Spain has similar to what we have, maybe a little bit better. And Spain and Germany have the most solar per capita of anywhere in the world. At one point, Germany had the most solar of any country in the world, period, not per capita. But now with China being so huge and moving into solar, they now have more solar. So anyway, my point is that solar does work here. We get plenty of sun, and it does work in upstate New York. Now looking at the way that we get sun, over the course of a year, this chart is a little confusing, but essentially you want to look at the yellow is what the panels are producing in kilowatt hours, and the white is the, the yellow is the amount bought in kilowatt hours, and the white is the amount that the panels are producing. You can see the white in May, June, July, even August is quite high. And so your panels are going to be producing a lot of energy from about March to October, and then they really taper off. And you will then buy more electricity from the grid during those times. During those other times. So November, December, January, February, you're going to be buying electricity from the grid. But overall, the amount that you send to the grid should break even, essentially. So the way that the panels are sized for you, the way your whole system is sized, is so that by the end of the year, you have fed into the grid just as much as you've needed to buy from the grid. And that's how a contractor is going to size your system for you. So roof-mounted arrays are probably the most common in terms of on-site solar. And what you need, again, is I'd focus on the good roof orientation. So you don't want any shading, and your roof should be in good condition, but you can always repair your roof before you put new panels on. Obviously, that adds to the cost, but if your roof is not in reasonably good shape in terms of the shingles and the strength of the roof, then you are going to want to do those improvements before you put panels on. But again, in orientation, it should be the placement, wherever you want to put them on the roof, should be positioned generally south. West works well, east works pretty well, but north does not work. So the north side of your home does not get a whole lot of sun over the course of a year. Excuse me. There are pole-mounted or ground-mounted arrays. So if the roof doesn't work for you, or if you have too many trees right by the house, or your orientation's all wrong, this allows some flexibility for where you put your panels. It also allows you to easily scrape off snow which is not as much of an issue as most people think. You don't have a lot of snow on your panels for very long, and it's really in the winter time when our solar you know, irradiance isn't that great anyway. So it's not a big deal, but it's nice to be able to clean them off. You can adjust them seasonally. I wouldn't recommend adjusting them daily, but you can adjust them seasonally. So in the summertime, you're going to want to make them more flatter of an angle so that they get the higher angle of the sun more of the time. And in the wintertime, you kind of position them up a little more vertically. The poles and the added length of wire increases the cost of an installation. So these systems are a little bit more expensive than roof-mounted systems generally. So there's a actually pretty simple way to estimate how many panels you'll need if you're curious. You're just going to want to look at your electricity bill and see what your daily watt hours are. Your peak sun hours is standard for our area, so it's an average daily sunshine for our latitude. The wattage of the solar panels you're thinking of buying, and there's a correction factor, which is also standard. So I'll just walk through a quick example of doing this calculation. I don't think, yes, hands up.
We do have one question about a slide ago, so I apologize for that. What if the panels outlive the life of the roof? We have one question.
Okay.
What if the panels outlive the life of the roof? What happens when you need a new roof?
Yeah. So if the roof has less than 5 years on it, in terms of whatever you have covering the roof, then definitely recommend replacing it. Not the whole roof, usually it's just the shingles or whatever it is. Structurally, the contractor is going to come out and do an assessment. Some old roofs really need some more bracing and things underneath, but all of that should be done before the panels go on. If the roof has 10 or more years on it, usually you can wait. The panels themselves are actually going to protect your roof from sunshine, from other elements, and so your roof, your shingles, will actually last longer once the panels are on there. If you had to, you can always remove the panels, repair the roof, and then put the panels back on. That can be expensive. So it's not unheard of, but the panels are going to last 20 years or more. So you're going to want to have a reasonably good roof to put them on. So hopefully that helps. So again, if we can now go to the calculation. Again, you don't have to remember any of this, just to give you some idea of what systems are going to look like. And we are being recorded, I believe, and also make the slides available if you want to look at them later. But essentially, daily watt hours, you can take it from 2 years electricity bills, average that out, divide by 365 to figure out your daily average. So I just very randomly took a 12,000 kilowatt hour home per year. Average, so over 2 years, it was 24,000 kilowatt hours. This is a home that's going to be using a little bit more than our local average, but it's a little high for most folks. But divide that by 365, so you come out with your watt hours per day. So in this example, it just happens to be about 33,000 watt hours per day. Peak sun hours in our area are about 5 hours a day, and that's an average of how much sun we get. That's peak sun for a day, but every day of the year. So some days we get more, some days we get less, but the average is about 5 hours a day. Wattage of solar panels, an average these days for watts of panels that you buy out there is about 320. That's your standard solar panel these days. 320, 350 is your standard. And a correction factor, because you're converting from energy losses from DC, the panels produce direct current, and then you're going to want to convert it to AC or alternating current in the home. That's about 15% line losses. So you multiply the total amount by that. So take your results. So let's take our example. It's 32,877 divided by 5, divided by 320, divided by 0.85 for that 15% correction factor. And it says 24.17 panels. We can round up And you can always size your system for a residential system up to 110% of your need. So if you have these 2 years of electricity bills, you can size it up to 110% of your needs. So you make sure you really can serve your full needs. So this example has about 25 panels. And the other thing I would say is if you have any thoughts of upgrading your home for more electricity. So if you're thinking of getting an electric vehicle and charging it at home, or if you're thinking of getting a hot tub that's electric, or an induction cook stove that is electric, or heat pumps, a geothermal heating system, heating and cooling. Any of those upgrades, you can actually add them into your estimate. So when you're working with a contractor, you can tell them, I'm planning on getting heat pumps in the next year or two. And they'll do the calculations and make sure that they size the system for your current need, but also that additional need that you're expecting to have. So make sure you think about some of those additional needs before you get a residential system, especially. So what does 25 panels look like? 25 320 watt panels is an 8 kilowatt system. So that's the kind of size they'll be talking to you about. In 8,000 watts or an 8 kilowatt system is what they'll recommend for you. And the PV modules themselves are about 16 to 18% efficient. And we are closing in on the maximum efficiency of silicon solar cells. And I won't get into the details of that, but 16 or 18% is actually really good. It's pretty close to the maximum of about 22% for solar, for silicon solar. So it doesn't sound great, but 16% is a pretty efficient panel these days. So it's about 50 meters squared of rooftop space. And so think about this, that the array area is the total module area, not the total area required by the system. So it's going to have some additional space around the modules for people to walk around. You have to have access to it by code, and you have to allow for space around it by fire code so that firefighters can get up there and fight any possible fires and be able to disconnect the system in the case of a fire, things like that. So this is my house. It's a pretty bad photo, but you can see right here, this is my whole house, this whole thing. And it's a shed roof, so it's just got one pitch, and 50 meters squared is about that size. It's half of my rooftop. And I have a pretty modest sized house, but you can actually go on this website, pvwatts.nrel.gov, and you can map out you can Google Earth your own home, and you can map out what it would look like in terms of real estate on your rooftop for an 8 kilowatt or whatever size system you want, which is kind of a nice feature. This is what it could look like on this house. So here we have an 8 kW system on a rooftop and another one on the ground. So this is 4x6, again, 4x6 on the ground. So that's about 24 panels, 8 kilowatts each right there. Another example on a barn. So if your house is over here and you don't really want to put them on your house, if you have some sort of outbuilding, that's a really great place to put them. If you don't have an outbuilding, but you want to plan on building one, you can put it on the outbuilding and make sure you position that outbuilding for good solar exposure. And then obviously the electricity runs through wires into the house. This is another example. It doesn't have to be one pitch roof. So they have some panels on this side and on this side. And together these probably are south, southwest, maybe southeast. And so they're perfectly fine in being positioned in those two configurations. So there are incentives, credits and rebates for PV, and I'll just run through these quickly. And again, I'm available to help anyone who's actually going in through this process, but just to give you a sense of what's out there. The state rebate is through what's called NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority. It is now actually 30 cents a watt. It's dropped down. These are groups of funding that expire over time, and it's it's been much, much higher over, in the past, but over time it drops down. It's double that if you're income qualified, which means if you're less than 80% the median area income, then it's twice that. And I don't know why I have 35 and 80, but it's about 30 and 70 now. It is subject to change, and it's guaranteed on acceptance of the application. So once you have somebody come out and do an assessment, if you're interested, you fill out an application, they submit it for you with NYSERDA, and that locks in your rate and your rebates. And again, systems can be sized up to 110%, but cannot exceed 110% of your energy demand for this rebate. Now you can size your system any size you want, but in order to get this rebate, they'll only pay for the first 110% of your need. State tax credits also then kick in, and these can be substantial. The issue with these is that they're tied to your taxes. So if you don't pay taxes because you're retired or for whatever reason you don't have a lot of income tax, then these can be less advantageous. But they're 25% of the system cost after the rebate, up to $5,000, and the maximum size of your system is 25 kW, which is really very, very large for a residential system. And then there's a property tax incentive that basically says that 100% tax exemption in case of if the panels were to increase your property tax value. You are exempt from that additional property tax. You will hear about different municipalities, including Tompkins County and the city of Ithaca and other municipalities, opted out of this property tax incentive. And the reason for that is complicated. It has to do with community solar and how those solar farms pay into the taxes for school taxes and what's called a payment in lieu of taxes. So in some municipalities, in some areas, you will you could have your property tax value increase because you put solar on, but our local county tax assessor has always vowed that local taxes will not increase if you put solar on your property. So it's a little tricky. So you may hear that in your case, it may go up, but in all likelihood, it won't. And even when it does, we're talking dollars every year. It's not hundreds or thousands of dollars. It increases your total value by a few $1,000s and therefore your property taxes by a few dollars possibly. So it's not a lot, so just to think about. Also then there's a federal tax credit. I crossed out 30% because here I had it corrected. These also expire, they go down over time. So last year was 30%, now this year in 2020 it's 26%, and that's about to fade out and change to 22% in 2021. So these are going down and they will fade out completely. So the final cost of a roof-mount system, if we're looking at it, the average price of installed residential PV, and this is after installation, but before incentives, is about $3 a watt. So just to keep it in perspective, 2003, so a while ago, but not terribly, they were about $8 a watt. In 2013, 10 years later, it was about $5.37 a watt. So the prices have gone down substantially, and you've probably been hearing about that. So an 8 kilowatt system, you're talking about $24,000. This will give, sorry about that, this will give some folks sticker shock, and rightfully so. Sorry about that, I don't know how to silence it. Anyway, after incentives, we're looking at $10,688. If you qualify for affordable solar, that reduced cost program, you're talking $76.88. Total savings are about 60 to 70% off that first price. Ground mount systems can be more expensive because of the wiring, the poles, and any trenching that they might have to do. They do require installation by a NYSERDA qualified installer, so you can't just install them yourself and get the incentives. You can install them yourself if your municipality allows you to, and you work with an electrician typically to get them hooked up. but for the incentives, you have to have a NYSERDA qualified installer do the work. And you can find those at this website. If you just Google NYSERDA and solar or PV installers, you'll find this link. So what about this house? I don't see anywhere you can put solar. They've got a small yard and their roof is completely shaded. Or this is downtown Ithaca. If you live in an apartment, you don't really have a lot of options for solar in the models that we just talked about. So there is something called community solar for everybody else. And that means a lot of folks. So there's a purchase or a subscription model. It's basically you can buy the panels on the solar farm, or you can subscribe to a plan where the panels are owned by somebody else, but you just pay a monthly subscription and get your solar, your electricity from the farm. It's net metered back to any residence in the same utility. So if you subscribe to a solar farm in NYSEG territory that's in some other county, that's fine. You can get that electricity net metered back to your residence. And so essentially it really opens it up for all of these folks who don't have ideal solar siting in their homes. And the other piece is you can take your panels or your subscription or your purchase of panels with you anywhere in the load zone. So if you move from here to, if you live in Ithaca and you move to Dryden or you move to Schuyler County, you can take your plan with you and just keep it. You don't have to offload it to somebody else. Community solar can look like this. So a local business might take 50 panels. A 4-person family could take those 25 panels we talked about, or 24 probably in that case. A college student might need a smaller amount. And the entire solar farm, this is one example. This is the first one that was in Trumansburg, first one in the state by Renovus, a local installer. And so this installation, can serve a whole lot of folks in one small footprint, essentially. So you can, if you purchase the panels, and this first farm was a purchase model, so you own the panels themselves, and the solar credits build up and are drawn down seasonally, just as if they were in your house. Those credits expire after 20 years. That's something to keep in mind. Even if you were to do solar today in your house, something you may have heard about from folks who had solar a while ago is that they would get a check at the end of the year, a rebate or some sort of check from the utility. After the solar credits built up, if you have extra, they would pay you for that extra. Well, that's not the case anymore. A couple of years ago, that changed. So it's basically those credits just keep rolling over. So if you have extra in one year, they roll over to the next year, and they continue to roll over. And you can use them. You can use them in those subsequent years as much as you want, but they do expire after 20 years. So just something to keep in mind. Community solar subscription works similarly. And this is another solar farm, and these are kind of interesting. These are sheep that graze in a solar farm. So they bring the sheep out to graze between the panels. So in the subscription model, you purchase your power rather than purchasing the panels themselves. So you don't own the panels, which is nice because there's no upfront cost. And you can cancel without a penalty pretty much anytime you want, although you have to read the fine print carefully of any of these contracts. And you also might, there might be a period of, if you cancel today, it takes them a couple of months to get that through NYSEG or through the utility, whoever that might be. And so just keep that in mind. But there's typically savings of 5 to 10% on the supply of electricity. And so when you sign up for it, there's different kinds of offers from different developers. And so the developer themselves might be advertising, save 10% on your electricity if you sign up with us. And what that means is it's the supply of electricity. So if you look at your electric bill, there's supply and delivery, and these are broken out. And delivery is basically the lines. It's NYSEG, it's the wires, it's the poles, and getting that electricity to you. That's all a fixed cost. There's taxes involved and all of that. That's fixed cost. That's about $15 a month that you're going to pay whether you like it or not. And that doesn't change. The supply is how much electricity you use. And NYSEG doesn't actually produce the electricity. They buy it from different people. So they buy it from coal-fired power plants, although there's fewer of those. They buy it from gas-fired power plants. They buy it from hydro facilities across the state. And they do this every day calculation of how much the electricity is costing them. And they also are buying it from these community solar farms. And so your electricity, they're not buying it. You're buying your supply from the solar farm. So if you're buying yours from the solar farm, that offsets what you're paying NYSEG to go out there and buy for you. So it's that supply of electricity. So on your bill, if your bill is $85 a month, $15 roughly will be the delivery rates charges, and you're left with $70. You'll save about $7 a month if you're on one of these that offers that give you 10% savings every month. So it's not a lot, $7 a month, for most folks. It's helpful, but it's not a lot. But it's also not more money. So you're getting solar, you're supporting solar, and you're not actually paying more for it. So I don't really see any reason not to do this. One thing to keep in mind is that you'll have a separate bill for the solar and for NYSEG. So that's one thing that people don't particularly like, but it's a small inconvenience to support solar and save a little bit of money. And again, the solar credits build up and are drawn down seasonally, just as if they were, on your roof. There's also a program called Solar for All, which is an income qualified program. So if you are at the 80% median area income, and so you qualify, basically you may qualify if you're a veteran receiving disability benefits, if you're on a fixed income, earn a minimum wage, or if you participate in any of these other programs, you are likely to qualify. And this is a more simple sort of no-cost subscription to a solar farm. NYSERDA offers it, and you save similar to what you would save if you subscribed yourself to a solar farm, but it's another way to go about getting community solar if you qualify, and you may end up saving a little bit more than if you go about it yourself. Okay, it's not available in all of New York State, but it is available in our region.
We have a question. Can you join more than one solar farm? And can you distinguish again the difference between delivery and supply of electric?
Sure. Yeah, the first question, no, you cannot. So if you have solar on your home, you cannot actually subscribe to a solar farm. And this is something that folks are trying to change, because some people got a small array on their house and it's not really enough to cover all their needs as they electrify more things in their house, and they would like more solar. And you can't currently go with a solar farm and residential solar. You also can't go with two different community solar farms. You can, however, add to your solar subscription, or in some cases add to the purchase of solar on a farm. But certainly on a subscription, you can change the size of your subscription. Up is usually pretty easy. Down is a little bit harder. You might have to just cancel it and start over, but you can add to the panels on a subscription solar farm. And again, to talk about the delivery and supply of electricity, I don't have a sample bill, but if you were to look at your NYSEG bill, you will see that they break it out. So it's not something you really have to worry about too much, but just to keep in mind that when you save money on a subscription solar plan, you're really just saving on that supply rate, not the delivery charges. So, sure.
Excuse me. I just don't understand the difference between what delivery means and what supply means. What does that actually mean? What do those two things mean?
Yeah, so supply is the electrons and delivery is the wires, if that helps. So the supply fluctuates, it's variable on how much you use. So how much electricity NYSEG is giving to me, or my panels are giving to me, is the supply. So some months I might use a lot, some months I might not use very much. If I'm somebody who has electric hot tub, an electric vehicle, and a geothermal system, I have a huge supply. Delivery is pretty standard. Everyone pays the same delivery. So the wires, the infrastructure upkeep, basically, that we pay for NYSEG to maintain is the delivery.
Could you go back
So we're
to the,
paying NYSEG to send us the electrons. Sorry, go ahead.
could you go back to the previous slide? Because that's where I'm lost.
Where we talked about supply and delivery?
Yes, okay.
Let's see.
I mean, you were saying something about there was no reason not to
Oh,
do.
I'm sorry.
I guess there's
Yeah,
a,
let me see. Was this, here we go.
no, no, not that far. Just to the one
Yeah,
you,
so it's really
Mm-mm.
this here.
no,
I'm
no.
sorry.
At least
I'm
three
not
more.
sure which
Right
one you
there,
mean.
right there.
Right there on supply.
Okay, so when you're saying
Okay.
savings of 5 to 10% on supply, no, it was the next one.
Yeah.
So when you say you have a slide there that says 5 to 10% savings on supply, and I don't understand where that savings is coming from. Yeah, that one.
Right. Okay, so if you look at your electricity bill and the whole bill is $100 a month, if you look at the breakdown of what the charges are for, you'll see that some of it is for supply. So if you pay $50 a month for electricity for those actual electrons, like you versus your neighbor, you have a pretty small electricity usage, so you might pay maybe $30 to $50 a month if you have a small usage. You'll save, if you go with community solar, you will be getting all of those electrons from the solar farm rather than from NYSEG. And the solar farm is offering savings on those electrons. So they can give you those electrons for cheaper than you're getting them from NYSEG. Now the wires, the community solar farm electricity still travels through the same NYSEG wires. So they can't change that, but they can offer you cheaper electricity. So
Okay,
that's where you save a little bit of money.
okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Another question. Yep.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions here. What criteria should you use in choosing which company to use for a solar farm or wind farm?
Yeah. So wind farms, there aren't that many. There's very few that actually offer community wind. There are some in some areas, but wind you'll usually hear about as an ESCO, and I'll get to those in just a minute on what that is. It's different than a community solar or community wind option. Now the criteria you would use, we do have guidelines that other people have developed. And the thing is, you really have to read your contract. And it's up to you, what's important to you. So you might see offers, for example, through a local business or a nonprofit or a co-op. So for example, Green Star Co-op, the Museum of the Earth, they have both run solar campaigns. So that if you are a member of those, or even if you're not, but if you're a member of those, you can actually pay into their community solar farm through them, basically, and the money savings, some amount of the money savings will go to them. So by subscribing through Green Star on a specific, Acme solar farm, some of the savings will go to Green Star. And then you'll also typically you'll get a gift card or something from Green Star. With the Museum of the Earth, I think they offered you would still get $100 back or something like that, or a free membership or something. So there's these different offers. But if you want to go with one of those, then you're basically supporting this nonprofit. Otherwise, if you just want to go out there and look at what's available, I would point you to a resource through something called Get Your Greenback Tompkins. So if you write this down, Get Your Greenback Tompkins, all one word, .org. They have a resource that compares the different community solar options. I don't like to keep those current because it's really, really hard to keep it current, and it's really difficult for me to judge them in any way. So I prefer that people do their own research, but there's this woman, Jerry Wiley, who's local, who does do some of this work, and Get Your Greenback Tompkins does post her research or her assessment of what's out there currently. So there you'll see maybe the top 4 or 5 that she's been able to find, and it'll compare, typical contract length and the terms, and just a summary, and then also how much they're offering in savings, some of those basic things. So you want to make sure if these things are important to you, some people are okay with 5% savings, but they want to make sure that the solar farm is right in their same town. If you're lucky enough, or if you want to support a solar farm in Dryden that you drive by every single day, you might be able to subscribe to that specific solar farm. There might be, for me personally, I have not heard of any real issues with any of these companies. They all have pros and cons. Their customer service is typically not great for any of them, but I've not heard of any real serious complaints. The only thing that I've heard across the board for all of them is that they're very slow to develop the farms. And this is not always the solar developer's fault. It's NYSEG, it's the state. These projects take a long time to develop. So if it's not a farm that's currently built already that you're subscribing to, often you'll be subscribing to a solar farm that they need to subscribe maybe 50, 60% of the farm before they even break ground. And in those cases, it can take a year or 2 before you actually get solar from that farm. So that's frustrating for some folks. So just ask them, how close are you to going live with my subscription, and those kind of questions. And definitely read the terms and make sure that some of the things I feel are important are that you can break your lease without any or your contract without any penalty, those kind of things. So just make sure that those are written in there. Sorry, go ahead.
We just
Other
have
questions?
what category is Clear Choice Energy? Or what do you know about them?
I'm pretty sure Clear Choice is an ESCO, not a solar developer. I can look it up real quick, but I seem to recall that Clear Choice is an ESCO. And I'll talk about that in just a minute on what those are. I could be wrong though. I seem to recall that that's what they are. But just to give you a sense of what an ESCO is versus a developer. So here, if I'll jump into that now. So ESCOs are these energy supply companies. These have been around for a lot longer than community solar. So in the past, for a long time now, you could choose green power. You could choose to buy your power and support solar, wind, or hydro. Usually you didn't have a choice in which kind, but it was just some sort of renewable that somebody was offering. So somebody, Acme company, Acme ESCO was offering cheaper electricity in some cases, or in other cases, they were offering clean power. Very rarely did you get both. Usually green power was a premium. You had to actually pay extra to support green power. And so that's an issue with ESCOs. It's changed. But the other issue is you can often save right up front. So the initial offer is, whereas you might be paying NYSEG $10 a kilowatt hour, I'm sorry, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. The ESCO could be offering you 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And overall, that sounds like huge savings, but a month or 2 later, that 6 cents goes up to 12 cents. And all of a sudden, for the rest of the time, you're paying 12 cents versus 10. They can go up to 15 cents. They can do anything they want pretty much. And they will warn you, but most people don't read their electricity bills very carefully. So all of a sudden, you have these exorbitant bills, and you really can be blindsided by that. So that's an unfortunately common occurrence. And they also carry an early termination fee. So you've signed this contract, they increase the rate, and now it's going to cost you something to get out of it. So these are some of the negatives of ESCOs. The positives are that sometimes you could have gotten, cheaper power, cheaper electricity, or like I say, also you can support these other projects that offer green power. But now community solar does all of that for you, basically. So to learn more about ESCOs, you could go to the Department of Public Service, the DPS site for New York State. And something to think about is when you go to this site, the first thing that pops up is this consumer advisory. So ESCOs traditionally have had a lot of issues across the country. So I would just warn you to be careful of signing up for an ESCO and to be sure you know what you're signing up for. Because there have been a lot of, like this price gouging and sort of things of increasing prices unexpectedly, even though they said they could do that, but legally they can do it. And so those are some of the issues. So just be careful. And again, community solar basically does for folks most of what an ESCO does. One of the only advantages is that the ESCO electricity you will see right on your utility bill. So if you sign up for an ESCO, you'll have what you pay NYSEG and then what you pay Acme or whoever, all on that same utility bill. And with community solar, you'll have two separate bills. And it can be confusing, but again, community solar basically does a lot of the same things. So we got into this a little bit and what you can combine. So you can do rooftop and ground mount. If you have a rooftop system, you can add more to it. You can add a ground mount system to a rooftop system. You cannot do rooftop and community solar at this time. And that's just a regulatory thing in New York State. So they're hoping to change that, but at this time, you cannot do both. You may be able to possibly purchase a used system from one of the early Renovus farms. If somebody signed up, purchased panels on a Renovus farm, and it moved out of the state or want to sell their panels, these don't come up very often, but it is possible, and you might hear about that. But it's really only one of these early Renovus farms that are allowed to do it because of a strange way that they went about creating the farm in the first place. You can do rooftop in an ESCO. So if you have rooftop and you can't do community solar, you can sign up for an ESCO, and you can sign up for a green ESCO if you like. So these are your options. And you can also do an ESCO and community solar, although frankly, I'm not sure why you would. But you can combine these two. So if you are on ESCO and you like it, you can sign up for community solar for some amount of electricity as well. Now, that is all I have on solar. If there's any questions on solar, maybe we can get those now, and then I'll go to lighting. Go ahead, Cheryl. Sorry, you're muted.
Thank you. Is there a point to be
Sure.
more savings from subscription or joining a solar farm?
So subscription is a method of joining a solar farm. I guess the question is whether it's purchase or subscription. And you will save more over time if you're able to purchase the panels. So that is the case. You will save more over time if you have the panels either on your own property or on a community solar farm. But you have to put up the money up front. So the lifetime of the panels, 20, 25 years, depending on the community solar farm. They may have different time contract periods, but yeah, you will save more over time, especially as electricity rates increase. So that's something else to keep in mind. If you bought the panels today to supply all of your electricity needs for the next 20 years, you're locking in your rate, essentially. So you're saying, I'm going to take out a loan, and I'm going to pay some amount every month, and then when the loan's paid off, I'm getting free electricity for those 20 years. If you subscribe to a solar farm, you don't really lock in your rate. You're saving 5 to 10% on the monthly rate, but that rate keeps going up or down or whatever it does. So if electricity rates next year go up 10%, you will be saving over what you would have been paying NYSEG. So you're still going to save that 10% over the NYSEG rate, but your rate also does go up with whatever NYSEG has to pay or whatever the going rates are. So just to keep that in mind. But if you bought the panels yourself, yeah, over time, it's an investment and a good investment.
There's a couple questions here. Who would we contact if we wanted to ask you or ask about solar options and things like that? Would that be you or someone else in the office?
That would be me in the office. So there's other people in the community you could talk to, but if you wanted to call back, I'd be happy to talk you through your specific options. And I have my contact info at the end, but I'll give you my email now. It's mary52@cornell.edu. So gm52@cornell.edu. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Another question is, given that most of us are over 65, 25 years might not be practical. What kind of timelines are we talking about for saving with renting panels?
Right. So you don't typically rent panels anymore. There was a leasing option in the past that's kind of phased out. So if you wanted to put panels on your house, really the only option today is to purchase them. They do typically increase, there's not a lot of data on this for New York State, but they do increase the value of the home. So if you were to sell the home in 20 years and the panels are already 20 years old, maybe not so much. But if you were to sell the home in 10 years or 15 years, then likely you might get some money back for them. If you subscribe to a solar farm, you sign up for some sort of a contract that's several years long. But again, you can break that at any time without a penalty. So the renting, I think, option is basically a subscription solar farm. So you're just buying your electricity from a solar farm, and if you were to sell or not need that electricity anymore for whatever reason, you're not paying for it.
You can transfer it, can't you, Guillermo?
Great. In some cases, not all. So if you move, it's in your name. If you move, you can keep it. You can't always give the contract to somebody else. If you own the panels, then it's yours to sell. So even if you're on a solar farm, if the panels are on that solar farm, but you own them, then yes, you can transfer the contract. But if it's a contract to subscribe to electricity on a solar farm, then not always.
I thought
But there's not really a need to. Somebody else could just start their own. Sorry.
I thought at the Dryden solar farm, which I am a part of, that they could be transferred to somebody else within the same NYSEG area. NYSEG.
The load zone?
Pardon me?
Yeah, the same NYSEG load zone, they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. So some farms might be different. If that's a subscription model, I don't see it to somebody else, but it's pretty easy to just break yours and have somebody else start their own.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. No more questions? I can go to lighting.
Hi, is there,
You're muted again, Cheryl.
can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Joanne.
Is there a
Sure.
minimum number of years for which you must subscribe from a solar farm? I mean, I don't want a 25-year, I'm 74. I don't want a
No.
25-year, contract.
Right. And so there's 2 points to think about there. One is that no, they're not 25-year contracts. So if you buy your panels, they are long-term contracts. If you buy them on a solar farm, to subscribe, they're usually between 2 and 10 years. I've not seen anything longer than 10 years, typically. So you may need to sign up for 2 years, but again, read the contract carefully, but usually you can break the contract without a penalty for most solar farms, not all of them. So some of them do have a penalty for breaking your contract early. So just kind of take a look at that. But they tend to be shorter term.
So if you die, okay, and you're in the middle of your contract is still there, do you have to somehow build this into your executor's instructions to cancel this thing, or they'll continually try to draw from, whatever your resources were?
That would have to be a question for the lawyers. So I would say read the contract, and if you have that question for the developer, then go ahead and ask them that, because I can't answer that for every developer. I don't know. But there shouldn't be a cost associated with it. It's just a sort of a formality of having to cancel it. Otherwise, they're going to keep billing you, sort of. Yeah, I mean, it's like canceling your NYSEG bill and your phone bill and all of that, I guess. It will be one more thing to cancel. Any other questions? No? Okay, I know we're also nearing the hour. I'm happy to keep going if folks want to stay on. I was asked, I was told that folks were interested in learning about their lighting options. So that's what I wanted to get into next. If anybody wants to stick around, I'm happy to keep going. Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Off we go. Lighting, completely different. So now you're using the electricity from the solar farm. Okay, thanks, Cheryl. So now we're using the electricity from the solar farm in your house. So it is the 4th largest user of electricity in US homes. So across the country is lighting. It's a significant user behind space heating and cooling. And it's relatively inexpensive to upgrade to energy efficiency options. And it's easy to do. So this is a pretty straightforward, pretty simple way of saving a little bit of money and saving a lot of energy. So it will save on your utility bills over time. You're not going to save a lot for each light bulb. If you go around your house, most homes have, I think the average is something like 30 light bulbs. They're not all on at the same time, hopefully. But in some places they are. But a lot of folks leave their lights on, several hours a day, lots of lights used. So these can add up, modest savings per light bulb, but they do add up. So there's 3 main types: your incandescents that everyone's grown up with, compact fluorescent, and LEDs. So these are the squiggly ones are the ones that we started to transfer to and transition into a while back. But LEDs are really the most efficient available today. And there's really no reason to go to CFLs. So if you have mainly incandescents, we suggest you go straight to LEDs, always. If you have some CFLs, don't throw them out yet. Use them for, until they burn out. And then you have to get rid of these in a specific way. So you can't just throw them in the garbage, unfortunately, because they do contain, almost all of them do contain mercury. And so you have to dispose of them properly. Now, this graphic also shows the amount of heat produced by each. So incandescents produce a whole lot of heat in order to create some light. CFLs produce some heat, but a lot less. And so most of the energy goes to light. LEDs are even better at moving most of the energy to light. These two, I'll show you, use similar amounts of energy, but these use a lot more because a lot of it is wasted as heat. So incandescents are the most inefficient. About 10% of the energy produced is light, and the rest is lost heat. So that's quite a lot. They can get very, very, very hot. So it's 5,000 degrees is across that filament, not on the glass, but the glass can get very, very hot as well. They're inexpensive. They have traditionally been inexpensive. They're becoming harder and harder to find as they're being phased out. But they have a very short lifespan. So they're quite expensive over time. So they use more energy and they burn out quicker than some of the other options. So overall, they're more expensive in that sense. CFLs, or compact fluorescents, they're moderately efficient. So they're 70% more efficient than incandescents. They do take some time to turn on, and they require some energy in that beginning minute. Sometimes it'll take a full minute for it to reach its full brightness. Some are better than others in order to do that. And most of them do have mercury as part of the gases in here. And so they do require special disposal. And they can cause fabrics to fade over time, things like that. So they can be harmful. They're difficult on the eyes sometimes. LED of LEDs just being so cold, too white, too bright. You'll see now, I'll show you in a minute, that they come in pretty much any warmth, any color you want. They're the most efficient option, 90% more efficient than incandescents. Most of the energy goes to creating light. Lifespan is 10 times or more of that of an incandescent. So even though they're more expensive in the store, there is a larger return on investment. So over time, they're actually cheaper. And they're cool to the touch as opposed to incandescents. So here's a cost comparison. The wattage, you'll see this is the actual energy usage, but this is for something that's comparable. So all of these produce about 800 lumens. And lumens is, 1 lumen is how much light is produced by a single candle. So 800 lumens is just a way of comparing across the brightness of, or the light created by different wattages of different kinds of light bulbs. So even though these use, in some cases drastically different amounts of to you in the room feels the same. I didn't talk about these halogen ones. These are a little bit more efficient than incandescents, but I don't recommend them either. They're still far more inefficient than LEDs or CFLs. So here you're saving quite a bit of energy. The annual cost for a bulb over the whole lifetime of the bulb, you'll see is about $1.25 for an LED versus $7.88 for an incandescent. So here, you're not saving a lot of money between LEDs and CFLs, but you will be avoiding that mercury, which is really important. And the bulb lasts longer and is a little bit more efficient. This is using 18 cents a kilowatt hour, which is quite high for our area. So I just pulled this example, but it's quite high. The way to look at and shop for lights is you can look at them in terms of this lighting facts. It's like a nutrition label on your cereal or any food. There's lighting facts label on every light bulb today. It's required by the EPA. And so you can compare if you prefer a warm light, like a reading light, versus a cool light for somewhere that you're doing more delicate work, like a shop. Maybe you want some brighter light. And that's shown here in light appearance. It's measured in kelvins. So 2700 K is quite warm. And it goes up to 6,000 K is very cool. So on this label, you'll see if you want a cooler light, you're going to want something with higher kelvins versus a lower more warm Kelvin. You can estimated yearly annual cost is here. And again, the lumens. So a 60-watt bulb equivalent is 800 lumens. So if you're replacing a 60-watt bulb, you're going to want to replace it with the same number of lumens. If you're replacing a 40-watt bulb, you want to make sure you're replacing it with something that gives you that same amount of light. And again, you can compare life expectancy and the energy used right there on the label.
I do have a couple of questions.
So again, the colors, this is the 2200, 2700. Okay, sure, shoot.
Are most LEDs dimmable now? Are most LEDs dimmable now?
Yes. So I think I had an example somewhere where it was not dimmable. Anyway, yes, most LEDs are dimmable. You'll have to check the package. The LEDs that are not dimmable usually say non-dimmable because almost all of them are dimmable.
Okay. And then are those yearly amounts yearly for the bulb itself or for the electricity used for 2 hours for the bulb?
Right. So this includes the cost of the bulb. Sorry, this is the energy cost. So no, this does not, the cost before in the previous slide.
Mhm.
So comparing across, this is the annual cost for the bulb, including the cost of the bulb. This is the cost of the bulb energy. So an LED, I bought my first LED maybe 10 years ago for $15. One bulb, it was at a fundraiser for a high school. And a single bulb cost $15. Now you can get them for about $1 each. So they've come way down in price. You can get a 5-pack for $5 typically, maybe a little bit more in some places. So there's good quality LEDs out there in the world. There are some that are better than others. So don't get super cut rate bulbs, but you can get pretty inexpensive LEDs. And then, yes, this is the cost of the energy over the lifetime of the bulb per year. Yeah, if that makes sense. No more questions? I just have a little bit more to go. Okay, I wanted to show you this just to give you an actual visual of the kelvins and the warmth of the light. So again, it's a much more orange, yellowy light. There's neutral, and then there's what's called daylight. These can be quite bright, very white. So it says good for reading. Get that K value on the package, and make sure you buy the one that you prefer. Now, if you were to go to many stores, like a big box store that I was in, a hardware store, has a display rack right there. You can turn the bulbs on. You can see what they look like. So that's quite nice sometimes. And that's all I have. So definitely open to more questions. These are the references I would send you to. cctompkins.org, that's our website. /solar sends you right to the solar pages. There's information there about community solar. And then this is the other one that I mentioned before, getyourgreenbacktompkins.org has information like to keep up to date. And that's my contact info. So I'll stop sharing actually. Let me show you that. If I stop sharing, I can see everybody and see hands and all of that if anybody has any more questions.
I have a question, if you can hear me.
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
I live in a rental building, and they offer a kind of a option to buy clean energy. Is that just a charity contribution that I give, or to the clean energy? Because it will be more expensive, yeah? the electrical bill will be
Okay,
more expensive when I buy the clean energy, which, I mean, electricity is electricity. There is no clean uh, so this is just a contribution to conservation, yeah?
right. So I don't know exactly what you're referring to. Somehow the building is choosing to buy into an ESCO.
So
And so are you are you metered,
the local
or is it the whole
the local
building one
company
meter?
offers a clean energy. I don't know, they
Right, but
provide
the
for me
utility,
the panels, and so, but the price of my bill will increase. So which I do is I just
right.
contribute to the idea of clean energy, yeah? You don't understand what I
Basically, so I guess the question, well, I think I do. The question is, do you have your own meter, or
Yes,
which, do you have your own meter?
yes. But they will have
Okay,
extra charge if I subscribe to clean energy.
right. So if you have your own meter, you can make any decision you want about your own energy choices. So
Yeah, yeah.
you can actually
I'm just
subscribe to a
asking.
solar farm.
Okay,
Right,
I'm
you can
just
subscribe
asking
to a
whether
solar
this is
farm
just a
and get,
contribution and it doesn't make me any cheaper, but
right. And I
rather
don't
I'm
know,
contributing.
right.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
what
I
I
don't
want
know
to know.
what they're offering, but I can say it sounds like to me that there, for some reason, the utility is offering a green energy option.
Yeah,
And if the utility is offering that, then yes, it's an ESCO. And an ESCO is basically you're contributing to supporting green energy on the grid.
exactly.
And that was the only option that existed in the past. So right now, you do still have that option, and that's through the utility, because the utility is partnering with an ESCO. But you also have the option, if you have your own meter, to go ahead and buy your own community solar subscription and save a little bit of money rather than paying extra. So in the
Okay,
same way that you're going to be supporting green electricity on the grid, you can choose to do it yourself on a community solar farm and not do a green ESCO if you would like. And you would be saving versus paying more.
okay, good. Thanks very much. Yeah, I will investigate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Way back at the beginning,
It's worth looking into.
yeah, you said, did you say that
I
the
can't hear you very well. Sorry.
cooperative extension offers individual energy assessments of your home?
No, we don't offer them. So we help you get them. So we can help you sign up for an energy audit or an energy
Oh, okay.
assessment. We
Okay.
don't actually perform them ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Someone did have a question that they had heard, let's see, I should bring it up. That LEDs could have a negative effect on sleep and that you should use incandescents, probably maybe in your bedroom, but have you heard that?
No, I think that's a fallacy. So I would call that something that's essentially not true. What happens is that LEDs, if they're that bright blue white light, that can interfere with sleep. If you use that bright blue light at nighttime, if you have a warmer LED, then it shouldn't interfere as much. Any kind of light or electronics, especially like computer screens, these tend to be a blue light. And looking at computer screens or a Kindle or those kind of screens, those can interfere with sleep. But it's more to do with the wavelength of the light than how you're producing it.
At
Yeah.
one point, I read about solar panels being incorporated into roofing material or material that looks like shingles on a roof. Has that gone anywhere?
I'd say it's becoming more popular, but it hasn't really taken off. The reason it hasn't is because there are good reasons to separate the roof from your electric system. If anything goes wrong with either one, they're separate. If you're building a new home or if you're a viable option, they tend to be more expensive and a little bit less efficient just because of the way that they're made. So it's harder to get the high efficiencies. Solar panels don't like to be hot. So there's an advantage to having them separate off the roof deck so that they can cool from below. Essentially, usually they lose a little bit of efficiency in those good summertime months. Visually, a lot of people like them. So they are out there. There's some that even look like the tiles themselves. So they're out there, and there's more options today than there used to be, but they really haven't taken off that much.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, and thank you for going over your time for this presentation. This was very informative.
Thank you very
Definitely.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.